Morning, everybody. So today we're going to have keto conversations with Carl Franklin of Two Keto Dudes podcast. Make sure you stay tuned till the end. We're going to have a first in the United States, so make sure you check that out. Hi, everybody. So today I have a special guest here today, Carl Franklin. You may know this guy's voice, and we don't get to see his face very often, so I'd like to introduce him. He is the host of Two Keto Dudes podcast, and he's also the creator of the Ketogenic Forum. So thanks for joining me.
Hi, glad to be here.
How did Two Keto Dudes get started?
It started because I got diabetes. And I was diagnosed in 2015 in June. I remember because I was in Norway. I was in Oslo speaking at a software conference. That's what I do. And I got a call from my doctor. It said, yeah, your labs came back and your A1C is 7.4, which is in the diabetic range. And it was a shock because I was heavy, so it wasn't that much of a shock. But there was no pre-diabetes. There was no you got to watch your sugars beforehand. I went from, yeah, your sugar's fine, don't worry about it, to you're diabetic. So, that kicked off sort of the whole ketogenic thing, but not quite. There's a little bit more that happened in there. So I went sort of low carb-ish because I knew that low carb was the way to control. I understood everything about insulin, blood sugar, and stuff. I was just too lazy to do it, right? Just couldn't do it. So I went low carb-ish, as good as I could, and which usually was like 3 or 4 days of good low carb, followed by 3 or 4 days of terrible eating. Just, I was addicted to fast food. Like I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning from a deep sleep and drive to Burger King and get bags of crap. That's how bad it was. So anyway, I was 366 pounds at my heaviest, and then that fall, Mark Miller, who is a good friend of mine, got cancer. He got prostate cancer. And he did some research into, I think, Dom D'Agostino and Thomas Seyfried, and they were researching, how glucose is a major fuel of cancers. So he was going to do the ketogenic diet to starve his tumor, and also in combination with hyperbaric oxygen therapy and exogenous ketones, which were shown in studies. The three were the most effective together. So he had done all of his research, and he got some of that from Richard Morris, who he had worked with before, and I knew Richard from the software business from that little circle of friends. And Mark's wife was going to do the ketogenic diet to lose weight, so they were all into it, and Richard, I had seen him like a year and a half before on Facebook with his before and after photos, flaunting how he had lost weight and reversed diabetes, and his was much more severe than mine. His A1C was 10 or 11. And he had done it by doing exactly the opposite of what the Australian Diabetes Association had told him to do. Like he took their advice, he became more diabetic. And then when he did the research on the ketogenic diet and did it and reversed his diabetes, he looked great, he felt great, he put all his markers on and I thought to myself, yeah, that guy's pretty smart. I want some of that. If I could, I'd just figure out how to do this one day.
Wow.
Yeah, so that started the whole thing. He became my mentor, Richard Morris, and we started the podcast to sort of document my journey as a commitment device to me, really. And then it just kind of blew up because we were doing it in the right place at the right time, kind of thing. The timing was good.
So we might not have people that know that much about podcasts or have even heard the Two Keto Dudes podcast. How many years have you been doing that?
So we started that in 2016. So it was just the next year. I think it was February when I went on the keto, and March is when we started. But don't quote me on that. It's around there sometime. But I had been doing podcasts for years before. In fact, my software development podcast called .NET Rocks was one of the first ever podcasts. And because we started in 2002, 2 years before the word existed, And so I watched Adam Curry and all these guys, Dave Weiner, the people who made the mechanisms of podcasts possible, which is a syndication. Basically, you subscribe to a series of audio events, right? And then they just come to your phone or your PC automatically. So by the time that was invented, we had like 300 shows in the archive. So we were right there at the beginning of the podcast thing, and that show still goes on to this day. And by the way, Mark Miller is still cancer-free.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah.
So if somebody is new to keto and trying to get started in it, do you have any
Yeah.
advice for them?
Keep calm and keto on. That is the mantra of Two Keto Dudes. Another one is show me the science, and that addresses the fear that people have, that I certainly had, and a lot of people who start keto, because you're not only are you going to go against all the advice that we've had, dietary advice that we've had, stemming from the USDA and the FDA and all of these government agencies that says don't eat fat, you're going to kill yourself, all of that. But now you have these uninformed people in your life, your closest friends, your doctors or whatever, are going to tell you that you're going to harm yourself. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So what we did in Two Keto Dudes, and I hope everyone takes this to heart, is we looked for the science that was real science. In other words, randomized controlled trials, not mouse studies, not studies where they ask you what you ate in the last year with no other factors. You know, if you don't do a randomized controlled trial, you don't know for sure. And there's a lot of correlations that are silly that illustrate the fact that correlation doesn't mean anything, it's causation. So we found the science, we shared it with everybody, and we said, look, don't be afraid, this is real, lean into it hard. You're not going to kill yourself. In fact, your body prefers to be in this state of ketosis. It's a more ancient state, and it's not even ancient. As little as 200 years ago, we all knew that the cure for diabetes was cut out the sugar and carbohydrates. And we all knew that was the way to lose weight. And then somewhere along the way, fat became the enemy. Is about in the 40s and 50s when that thing started to take shape, and the government guidelines got shaped from that, and then the anti-fat stuff and the low fat. And you can see, speaking of correlations, there's a huge correlation between low-fat dieting and diabetes, and it's like 1-to-1. So there you go. I mean, the advice that I would give you is you need more fat at first to replace the carbohydrates that you're taking out of your diet because you need energy, and you also need more salt than you think you need. And the reason for that is when you stop eating so many carbohydrates, your insulin goes low, which is the key to everything. Lower insulin is the key to everything. When your insulin goes low, your kidneys flush salt and electrolytes that they have been abnormally holding for all your life probably, because our insulin is mostly high. So that's why they say, you know, if you have hypertension, it's probably insulin related, and you shouldn't eat so much salt because you're already retaining a lot of salt, right? But once you go keto and your insulin drops, your salt's going to flush. You might get headaches, you might feel dizzy, but it passes. And so that's why Keep Calm and Keto On is a great mantra. It's just keep doing it. You know, go through that process of, some people call it keto flu, I call it carb withdrawal, and keep your salt high. You know, keep drinking water, and eat mostly fat, some protein, as little carbohydrates as possible, preferably from green leafy vegetables, and maybe a few nuts, and stop when you're full. That's the advice.
What if their doctor is wholeheartedly against it? Is there any advice to somebody to approach their doctor? And I noticed, I think the ADA just came out with something talking about the ketogenic diet could be one of the ways to cure type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, the landmark studies have come from Virta, VIRTA Health, which is headed up by Professor Stephen Phinney, and he and Jeff Volek wrote the Bible on the ketogenic diet. So what we say on our show is you try to change your doctor, right? You bring them the research and the science, And if they don't read it, or they refuse to believe it, then you change your doctor. Change your doctor or change your doctor,
Yeah.
right? It's that simple. I mean, if a doctor who is against the ketogenic diet sees all of their ex-patients coming back to them after a year completely free of diabetes, that will change them.
Yeah. Well, I know that you're a big science guy, and
Getting smaller.
getting smaller. There you go. Getting smaller. So one thing that they've been talking about recently, there's been a trend going on. I've heard it on the podcast. Dr. Baker, Dr. Berry. A lot of people are going towards carnivore style of a keto diet,
Right.
and we heard that yesterday too. So what are your thoughts on that?
All right, so there isn't any studies that, as far as I know, there aren't any studies that follow people on a carnivore diet versus other diets over time. But the mechanisms for what happens when you eat vegetables versus just meats is kind of known, and the science is coming out on that. So it's mechanistic science, it's not necessarily, so it's more biochemistry than it is observational or patient focused. But the interesting thing is that plants have mechanisms for survival just like animals have mechanisms, but plants can't get up and defend themselves physically, so their weapons tend to be chemical. And while the domesticated plants that we eat are obviously as less benign than, say, hemlock or something poisonous, there are lots of these chemicals and compounds in plants that perhaps over time can cause problems. And I don't know all the science on it, but one of the key signs of this, they think, is leaky gut syndrome. That some plants, grains in particular, gluten, right, has this ability to participate in a mechanism that causes toxins in the gut to leach outside into the bloodstream. And that causes a whole host of problems. So leaky gut syndrome is real. I can't tell you if plants cause it or gluten causes it, but I do know this: meat does not. Right? So my advice for anybody who is having trouble on a ketogenic diet, and that could manifest itself in many ways: blood sugar, mood swings, whatever, not feeling well, illness, like getting colds all the time, whatever it is, you might want to just try eating the ultimate ketogenic diet. Well, the ultimate ketogenic diet would be a fast, but that's too difficult for people right out of the gate, I think. Just eat meat, salt, water, and fatty meats, and try that for a week and see how you feel, right? And even though you may not be able to pinpoint the exact mechanism by which that is, fixing things or whatever, it's the same as the ketogenic diet, which is you're removing stuff that is suspect to make you deranged. And if you do that, you at least know that it's something else in your diet that's causing your problems. So now what you can do, I'm an engineer, so this is what I would do, is just add back those foods one at a time until you find the thing that's causing it. And I've done it myself. So I feel much better when I eat just meat, but it's kind of hard to do all the time.
Yeah. Well, and they say that people that are doing the carnivore, can you have spices when you're doing that, or?
Yeah, see, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, if I was doing an experiment to find out if it was anything but meat that was causing a problem, I would just stick with meat and salt.
Yeah.
Butter would be the first thing that I add.
Butter, yeah.
But it's also, an animal product. So.
Yeah. What do you have going on right now? Do you have anything cooking? Anything?
Oh, that was a meatball. That was a segue, if I haven't heard one. Yes. I discovered earlier this year a noodle recipe that is essentially egg noodles. But there's as many carbs as there are in eggs, right? So it's an egg-based noodle that has a little magic fairy dust in there to turn it into noodles. And essentially you make a batter and you make a crepe, a very thin crepe, and it only takes a minute, and then you slice it with a pizza slicer, or you could chill it and put it through a pasta machine, and you have noodles. And the people that have eaten them, that I've given them to, can't believe how good they are. They're not too eggy, but they are like egg noodles. They have that consistency and that flavor and that texture.
That's awesome. So if that ends up happening, where would people be able to find out more about that?
Well, the website is bzoodles.com, which is BZOODLES.com. Yeah.
Awesome. So another thing I want to talk about, New London and the Keto Fest that happens there.
Right.
You also do a mini version yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But we had something happen here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
That you weren't the person hosting it this
Right.
time. Keto Mini Fest. We had that happen yesterday. I want to get your thoughts on that. How you think it went?
It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. And when we had Keto Fest at first, it started with the idea that we wanted to have a conference with talks, but we also wanted to have a social aspect. We wanted to do cooking demos and and food-centric things and walking tours of the town. We wanted to get the restaurants involved. So it's kind of we just sort of take over this town, right? And then the mini fest just became like 4-hour versions of those things, which I started doing at RD86, where there was a cooking demo and we served a dish, and then we had somebody Zoom or Skype in, somebody famous like Megan Ramos, or Sean Baker's doing one at my house on the 25th of May. Nina Teicholz, so people would come in as guest lecturers, right? Dave Feldman did, Nadir Ali, and that's been kind of cool, and I've been doing that at my house and in New London. But what you guys did was really the first like full day keto mini fest that I wasn't a part of organizing. And so we wanted to do this to encourage other people to do these events under that kind of banner, and then we would offer support, right? So there's a lot of people that have expressed interest in doing that, but none of them have really taken the reins and want to go through with it, except you guys. So
That's us. We did it.
yeah, it was awesome. And Mini Fest wasn't MINI, it was MINNE.
Yes.
Mini Fest, Minnesota Fest.
Yeah.
It was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I liked how it was really food centric, right? So there was a lot of cooking demos, and the demos were all about the stuff that you served at lunch, right? And there was a few vendors, but mostly it was a social gathering. And then Maria Emmerich, of course, did a lecture on the ketogenic diet, of course. So you covered all the bases. It was great.
Yeah, I think it went really well. In coming up in New London now, you're gonna have your Keto Fest, and it's in July, right?
Yep. July 21st.
And tickets still available for that?
Yep. KetoFest.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Who do you have do you have any speakers that you have coming for that?
We do. All right, so we got Dr. Ken Berry, Dr. Nadir Ali, Amy Berger, Dave Feldman, Siobhan Huggins, Peter Ballerstedt, the sod father. He's awesome, you gotta see him. Megan Ramos, Amber O'Hearn, Richard Morris is actually gonna do a talk this year, and Dr. Sean Baker. So it's a good lineup.
Yeah, if you get a chance and want to check out the area, I've never been to Connecticut. I hear that it's beautiful out there.
And we got lobster.
Lobster. Yeah. Make sure go get your tickets if you get a chance. Go out there, check it out. So how can people find you on social media?
Sure, just look for 2 Keto Dudes. There's a lot of aliases that we have at 2keto.com. So FB for Facebook.2keto.com is our Facebook group. Blog.2keto.com is our blog. Of course, 2ketodudes.com is is our homepage for our podcast, but you can listen to it online there or in your podcast thing. We also have a ketogenic forum that we started, and that's at forum.2keto.com. And there's about 30,000 people in there now.
Well, I really appreciate you sitting down and having this keto conversations with me. So I really appreciate the time.
Thanks, Jason, and thank you for everything that you do as well.
Thank you. So there it is, everybody. Do your best to do your best and take it day by day.